For a long time, I was scared to share my true color, to be who I truly was. I was hiding in the story I was reading, fearful of what people would think about me. But this ends now. I have stopped running. I decide to accept my diversity. Today, I will share our story of neurodiversity and mental health awareness. Welcome on the ADHD Melly Show. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm so happy to have you today. And I want, before we start, say thank you to everybody that support my GoFundMe campaign. I'm just super grateful that you are helping me like that. I'm just honored. I just can't believe it. And yeah, first of all, I just want to say that I forgot to take off my air conditioning, so I'm going to stop it. Give me 2 seconds. I'm staying online, don't worry. I'm just going to take it off because, but it's going to be better this way with no sound around. So today we're going to talk about university, about school, about how education can be different for people neurodiverse versus neurotypical. And even that, if you're neurodiverse, that doesn't mean that you're not good at school or you're good, or you know what I mean. It really depends of how your brain works and how you comprehend studying. Because the person that I invite today, Alyssa, she's good in school. She has a PhD and she succeeds, and she has ADHD, and she never had any problem with school. But it doesn't matter because she still felt isolated, and she still feels that her ADHD diagnosis made her understand better her person and her personality and how she simply feel with herself. So just bring her in now, and thank you so much, Alyssa, for coming today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I enjoy watching you talk to other people too, so it's pretty cool to be here. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and how I completely my mind was totally blown when I received my diagnosis, because I was actually like 20 or sorry, I was 30 years old when I was diagnosed. And so obviously by that time I was like in the final years of my PhD. I had gone through 11 years of college and always been like an A-B student, never really the top of the class, never really like the worst, sometimes, but not not all the time. Yeah, and it kind of blew my mind that a lot of the things I had struggled with in school can just be explained, and like a lot of it can be magicked away by like one simple Adderall. So yeah, I guess do you want me to just like tell my
Yeah, go ahead. Normally I ask you to do this, but you just took the front and go away. So do
yeah,
it. Just tell me a little bit more about yourself. You're doing right. You're
yeah,
doing great.
yeah. So okay, yeah. So I like never really figured out it's the school thing. I always just kind of like taught myself how to do things, and I think it's because like I'm an only child and my parents just sort of told me to go do my own thing. So yeah, through a lot of school I realized when I got my diagnosis that like I hadn't actually really been learning in the classroom. I think I just been teaching myself and got lucky on tests. What prompted me to get into the diagnosis was during a PhD program, you spend, at least in the humanities, you spend 2 or 3 years taking classes, and then you take a really big exam, and then from there you can go and do your own research. So a lot of it, there's not a lot of testing, at least in the humanities, once you get into like a master's or doctoral program. So that was really good for me because I panic around tests. But like I couldn't figure out why I was underperforming in comparison to my peers, especially on things like knowing dates and knowing how to spell things properly. For reference, I was in musicology, which is like music sociology meets anthropology meets music history. So a lot of it is about like knowing the names and the dates of the composers and their compositions and being able to identify it. And I was struggling, like no matter what I did, I couldn't remember it. And I'd always had problems remembering dates. And like honestly, in high school, I'm pretty sure I cheated my way through most of like AP US history. It's not alone, but not a good thing. Don't do that. Like, yeah, understand now looking back, I understand that was definitely like a coping mechanism because I felt the pressure to succeed. I didn't know how to. And I, turned to like writing everything down on little pieces of paper. Yeah, so fast forward, 15 years, and I'm like, my status in my program was put on the line. Like, I didn't know if I would be kicked out or not because I could not pass these exams for the life of me. And at one point, there was a professor who sat me down and basically asked me if I had a learning disability, and I was like, no, it's also kind of offensive that you asked that. I don't know if that's even legal for you to ask that. But from there, I was like, okay, well, there's got to be an explanation. I don't like failing at things. I'm going to figure out this. And I ended up going through the process of being diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Fortunately, I'm incredibly privileged that I had access to the diagnosis. I have a primary care doctor who believes you, and she'll order tests and whatnot. Like the first time, you don't have to fight, which is, a big problem for people with disabilities and disabled folks. Yeah, and so it just started to click, like talking to a classmate who had been diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and this classmate and I were experiencing a lot of the similar struggles. We both like have to write literally everything down that we hear, otherwise it's gone.
True.
So yeah, and once I started like receiving treatment in the form of medication, it was like somebody shut a TV, like a TV had been in the background my entire life, and it's like somebody like shut it off. I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be this hard. I don't have to like sit here every day and bribe myself with mini candy bars to like get things done. So yeah, it really just completely changed my life. Knowing that there's a reason why, it's something is technically like wrong with me, but like being able to put a name on that and a label on that has helped so much. And I think it's also helped a lot because it's allowed me to find people like you who understand this community and understand this struggle that, I think there's the stereotype is people with ADHD can't focus, can't get things done, really struggle to manage their lives. And it's very true. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be that way if you get like support systems in place. And so like looking back throughout my educational history, I realized that I had been successful because it was a system I understood. I knew what I had to do in order to pass, in order to make people happy, and having those like expectations really cemented in my mind, I think allowed me to figure out like what I needed to do well. And so yeah, that it just opened me up to the realization that there's a lot of things that I'm not the greatest at, and the like one common thing they all have is I don't understand what the end goal is. And so like if I can't it's a big saying, like if you can't envision the end product, then you cannot you stand no chance of like figuring out how to get there. Yeah, and so it was when I received the diagnosis, it made sense. It's like, light bulb moment, and everything got a lot easier, but there was also like a lot of grief and like sadness for what could have been, especially this late in my life, or in like this far along in my academic career. just knowing that, okay, how much more could I have done? Like how much more successful could I have been if I hadn't, if I had been aware of these struggles. And it was really frustrating for me for my relationship with my parents, because I also, long story, I ended up going through a box of report cards, like grades and stuff from elementary school, and all of them were like, Alyssa needs to stay in her seat. Alyssa rushes through tests too much. She would be so much better if she slowed down. And I'm like, what? How did nobody see this? Like, it, all the classic stuff, like Alyssa, I don't know, does things that she's not supposed to. But I always got away with it because I was performing well, like on standardized tests. Yeah, so it really, I think, strained my parents were like, oh yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, You see how I am now? And they're like, now they're starting to go. But it changed just completely how I understand myself. And I'm really fortunate also that sorry, I lost my train of thought. So I'm really fortunate, I think, that it came in at the time that it did, because I am not pursuing any jobs in academia. I'm not looking to be a professor. I'm not looking to work in higher education, really. I'm cool with like adjacent stuff, so like administration, but I'm burnt out because academia is a terrible place, and especially if you are not fitting into the perfect, very privileged mold, even like if you have the slightest defect. So knowing that I have ADHD is helping me in the job search process, because I know that if I get a job where they don't lay out the expectations very clearly, or I don't have a direct supervisor or person to report to that is willing to take an extra minute or two just to go over directions with me another time, then I'm not going to do well. And it's so knowing that having the diagnosis has really given me the like leverage to advocate for what I do need. And yeah, I just try to be really vocal and transparent about this diagnosis, because I have a PhD, and it's like not, it doesn't fit into the stereotype. And I think it shows that when we are given the structure, and when we are really pushed to understand how to succeed, and like given the resources to succeed in something, that we can kill. And yeah, it was helpful too before, like once I finally did receive the diagnosis. I taught one class before that position ended, and it was helpful to be able to be like transparent with my students too, and just say, oh, I forgot to reply to that email, and just keep bugging me. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Or like, you forgot about that, and that's okay. Like extending, maybe more empathetic too, because I knew it wasn't necessarily laziness or lack of organization. And yeah, it made me realize also that I love outlining like procedures, and I love outlining ideas and arguments and stuff, like, but it's more of a scattered approach. And so I love making things into outlines, because it kind of lets you, throw all of your ideas onto a piece of paper, and then you can like move them around to where they make sense. Yeah, so that understanding that that's like a coping mechanism for me allows me to like reframe it, or like understand it in a different way, as a strength. Because we have to put in so much extra work just to like exist. a lot of times it makes you really tired. but I think in the end, it also is like more strengths and experiences that not necessarily everyone has.
So you nobody knew about what you had or ask your parent to seek a diagnosis. That's quite
Yeah,
strange,
and
you
like
know.
I did this like marching band drum and bugle corps thing forever, and my first couple years my nickname was awkward because I'm just like so weird and I don't interact with people like everyone else does. And I think that might be why I was successful in academia, because everyone is awkward. So it's like you don't really not standing out too much. So yeah. Nobody knew. I'm just like the crazy. That's a ableist. Trying to eliminate things like creepy from my vocabulary, because for anybody
Yeah.
who's watching that isn't familiar, it's an ableist term that like is used to put people down. So trying to fix that for myself. Um, yeah, it's just ridiculous that nobody noticed. Like I did a master's degree in German, and I never really could understand how language worked. I can't tell you what French is a nightmare for me. I don't know. At least German like capitalizes all of the nouns, so you know where the nouns are. In French, I'm like, no. It's just amazing because like it's all so clear to me now. And I was 30 when I was diagnosed, but I think it's gonna really help me going forward. And it's also kind of cool to like, I've got friends who have kids now, and their kids might have ADHD or another learning disability. And so I try to go out of my way to be like, oh yeah, I take Adderall twice a day too. Look, you're not weird. I mean, everyone's a little weird, but it's not like you're broken or anything.
It's how you are, and it is. You cannot do anything about it. You know, you have
Yeah.
ADHD, and it simply helps you understand yourself better and just say, okay, that's okay. It's me. It's not because I'm incapable of working or incapable of doing things, because for me at school, even teacher tell me that I was not capable of anything, because for me it's the contrary. I was very bad at school,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it was easier for them to know that something was wrong. You know, when you're not able to do math because your brain freeze at the test because you don't remember all the formula, because that's the worst for me, is like remembering all the formulas. Maybe I would be good if it was not something you have to remember, you know. And
Yeah. And that's like, yeah, that's what I experienced again in academia. Like that's why I liked history and music history, because it's much more like empathetic and like emotionally driven. And the facts are the facts, but you interpret them and you can remember them as like stories. And if you're not, that's kind of hard to do with math. I was always like mediocre in math, not the greatest, not the worst, but I'm pretty sure a lot of my like okayness in math was because everybody in my high school cheated. It was just like not good. So yeah. But yeah, and I like also that helps me understand like why students cheat. It's not because they're trying to take a shortcut. It's because they feel the pressure to be successful and they don't know how to get there without that, or like they don't have the time to figure anything out, like support systems out or get a tutor, which is
expensive.
Yeah, I never had it. um yeah, so I think it's kind of cool seeing more people be open about their struggles, because being more open about what you're struggling with, I think it makes your achievements just that much more valuable and like that much more like worth a point of pride.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so what Were you still in school when you start taking your medication, or you finished?
No, I was still in school. I was done taking classes. So at that point, I was doing research, like interviewing people, and then doing all of there's like a bunch of back end work that has to go into interviews before you can like analyze them. And I was kind of stuck. Didn't really know what came next, and unfortunately, in grad school, it can be really easy just to tread water and not really make any progress, because it's not uncommon for a dissertation to take like 5 or 6 years to write. It shouldn't be like that. And for anybody who doesn't know, like a dissertation is essentially you're writing and researching and writing a book. So it's a lot, and that's like your full-time job, if you're lucky. So I was being paid to not the average graduate student stipend is like $20,000 US, maybe like 23 now. So being paid at the poverty line to sit and guide my own work, and like I was my own boss for 3 years doing my own thing, and there would be times where I wouldn't write a single page for 2 weeks, and then there would be times where I would write 30 pages in one day. And I was like, okay, well, then maybe that's just normal. And then I realized I don't have to be like furiously panic typing to try and get everything done. Because it turns out it was just like a regulation, like a self-regulation thing. Not being able to like sit down and do the work.
I know what it is. It's so hard sometimes. Yeah, I have a contract and I'm like, I need to start it, I need to start it, I need to start it. And when it's the rush time, it's like I'm doing it all yet.
Yeah. Or like, everybody would suggest, well, why don't you put like sticky notes are good for me because they're like tactile, I can touch them, I can see them. But like everything else, like no matter what app it is, no matter how many reminders it sends me, just it just goes in one ear and out the other, and I have no hope of like just even acknowledging it. So that's it's been nice to see things, or to have things like apps, productivity apps actually be functional and like relevant to my life, or like actually have an impact.
True, because some productivity app, the problem is you have it's so overwhelming, and it's not the best neither. You need to have something simple but functional, and having too much graphic and stuff like that to make it pretty sometimes is just not good for us. It's a little bit like TikTok. Don't go there or you're not going to finish your work. It's the worst place to be and hurt if you want to stay motivated and doing work. Because you can spend hours on that app and not stop. It's like the worst enemy of ADHDers.
Yeah, I know. I can't even let myself, like, I have the app, but I can't open it because all of a sudden, it's like 4 hours later.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like one thing that, looking back, also just like the hyper focus and just going through something nonstop, like working on something, that definitely helped me get through school, but it's not sustainable. It just makes you feel tired and burns you out, and it's good in short bursts, but if that's the only way you can get things done, at least for me, I get too burnt out. So knowing that is something I can look out for and like watch out for, is helpful too.
Absolutely. And yes, burnout is easy because the problem is you need to do things so much. For me, it's like you need money all the time to finish, pay everything, and you're focusing too much on the problem that you cannot find any solution because your brain is stopping you from finding any solution. It just wants you to sleep and cry all day. It's the only thing it wants.
Yeah, exactly. Or do random. For me, I fall into the trap of doing random side projects. Like just I do a lot of like volunteering, and it's actually, I think, a way for me to avoid doing the work I should be doing to
Yeah.
like eat and live. So yeah, that's always a challenge. Um, but yeah, now at least I know to look out for it now.
I guess that when you start your medication, you finish your book easier, I guess. How
Yeah,
was it?
yeah. Like all of a sudden, I could just sit down and write. Which that's like, it's funny because when you're working on something like a big project, either whether it's like a term paper, like an end of semester paper, or something like a dissertation or a thesis, most people just give you the advice of like, oh, well, you just need to sit down and write. And I'm sitting there like, I can't. And then then they're like, well, why haven't you done anything? I'm like, well, first, you didn't give me a deadline or like any expectation.
That worse. Need
Yeah.
deadlines. It's like the worst. I hate when client doesn't give me any deadlines because
No.
the deadline is going to be never if you don't give
Yeah,
me
this isn't
any.
gonna get done. Not gonna get done. Yeah, and so yeah, being medicated like helped me make progress without the like the fear of a deadline
Mhm.
looming over me and like the consequences, which was just wild. Like I never thought, I'm trying to get into user experience research positions, like the whole field. And so I'm doing some online courses and stuff, and they're all up to me how much I want to get done or not get done in a day. And, prior to being medicated, I don't think I would have been able to do anything. But I'm chugging along on some things, and it's just a game changer. It's just amazing how totally like paralyzing ADHD can make or can be in terms of like.
Absolutely. And sometimes in schools it can be a little bit easier because you're like your teacher is telling you what to do. He tells you to do when you need to do it. It tells you
Mhm.
mostly anything in your life, and your parents also, right? So it's easier when you're a teenager and a child to make things
Yeah,
work. But when you're in college, it's like free for all. The only thing you know is when the exam is coming.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was another thing that like totally changed. I hadn't realized that like when you get a reading assignment, I learned that I had been skimming everything, like not reading every word, just maybe a few
I
words of
do.
a paragraph here and there, and then like I could put it together in my head. And now just being able to sit down and read a book and like read it word for word is, again, it makes me think back like, okay, how much different would my life have been if I didn't struggle with these things?
Mm.
But I mean, like ultimately, that's like a useless question. That's just gonna make me feel like shit. So it's not worth asking. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used medication. It was easier, but not that much, okay? And I decided to stop it at 14 because for me it was like a punishment. My mom used that to like force me to do things that I didn't want to do.
Oh,
So for a long time I didn't want to take medication, but now I'm trying to reconsider it to maybe take it again. But
yeah.
it's for me. I lived that. It was a traumatized experience to have
Oh, yeah.
ADHD in the 90s because nobody really understand,
Mhm.
and they put you in a box in a way almost. Even in high school, my teachers told me that I was not able to graduate and stuff like that because
Mhm.
of my ADHD. I failed math 3 times, a math class, the same math test. I needed to do it 3 times to succeed, but I did succeeded. And
Yeah.
but it was quite hard, and mostly because I didn't have the support that I needed to succeed. If I had more support,
Mhm.
probably I would have get it the first time, but it's all about support system, which I didn't have, or it was not efficient enough to just work,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's why I'm asking to help me with my student fund because
Oh, yeah.
nobody else me paying my study. I have a lot of debt and loan and stuff like that, but government gives scholarships, but they don't give scholarship to part time. they only give it to full-time student, and the problem with ADHD, it takes me double the time to do the work. So it's maybe,
Yeah.
and they don't feel it's a disability for them, and that's a problem. ADHD
Oh
is a
yeah.
disability. You have idea, and people don't have any idea of how hard it is to have
Yeah.
ADHD and to just focus in doing something. And when we fail in something, it's like the end of the world, because you have the impression that you're never going to succeed because
Yep.
of your disability, because you fail all the time. You always failed. I never succeed in anything,
Yeah.
really. And I'm 33, and I don't remember succeeding in something concrete. Maybe the ADHD militia, I will tell, that is a success, but there's not as much people that I wish I have. English is my second language, so maybe people don't like my accent, but what do you want me to say? It's me.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's really rough. Like there's just so many more. I had this conversation the other day, and I think there was like a meme or something that prompted it about like receiving kids with ADHD receive like 20,000 more negative, like 20,000 more a lot more negative feedback.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the only time that somebody really would talk to me was when I was doing something wrong. And there's no positive reinforcement in there, and it's I mean, fortunately for me, fortunately, I went to a not so great school system, and they don't, I had okay enough to where I wasn't one of the people they were really worried about, because English was my first language, and my school, I'm from the United States, so everything was in English. But a lot of my classmates, it's their second or third or fourth language, and so we kind of, people like me, just kind of got to coast along. And yeah, it's a weird position to be in. And just seeing how many other people have the same challenges has made it a lot easier too. Like I've had work friends who we slack each other back and forth with like memes about ADHD, and we're like, oh wait, we're not working. This is the problem here. So yeah, it's pretty funny. But also I think it's more like widespread. You mentioned I'm 32, I'm just about the same age, and yeah, I think the stigma around it is, at least for our parents and that generation and like beyond, they're so, it's like you're broken and you can never be fixed, or you could never succeed at anything, and it's really frustrating, and it doesn't, it's hard to have hope, and it's hard to do things when you're told that you're gonna fail no matter what.
Yeah, even the I don't know what I would say in English, but the person that helps you find a career when you're in high school, that person that helps you find a college and stuff like that, and they're like, you're not going to go to college, why are you thinking about that? You should think about getting a technique or something like that, to be like assisting in a hospital or something like that, cleaning diapers and stuff like that. What they wanted me to do, to go check that out, but I'm gross if I see people like in this situation. It's not for me to see blood and poop and stuff like that. It's going to gross me. I'm more like somebody creative, and I wish they could bring me to website design, and I didn't have to learn all by myself to make a small living on that. I spent so many years to teach myself how to make website. Imagine if they just helped me just
do it.
Go to school for that, but they didn't, and I felt for a very long time that the only way for me to work was for myself, and I, and not count on anyone else, because nobody's going to help you ever, and it was this mentality that I grew up all my 20s and now my 30s, and that's not the the right way to do it, you need a system support, but you learn to live without it because you don't have any, and nobody wants to help you because they don't understand you.
Yeah, 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 and like you're gonna, I mean, you're gonna fail no matter what, because
Mm-hmm.
you either go to like the technical career training and you have the same issue where nobody understands like how to give you the help you need, or you go to college and nobody understands how to give you the help you need. So it's like you're, no matter what you do, nobody, and it's so frustrating. And the wild thing is, or the frustrate one of the most frustrating things for me is, the things that help us, like having clear instructions, or having very clear deadlines, or following up meetings with key takeaways and next steps. That's something that benefits everyone. And it's not just a crutch for us. It's not just somebody holding our hands. It's something that helps us, and it helps us work within our teams better, but it also helps the whole team just understand instructions better. Because might have somebody like me who truly doesn't know what's going on, but somehow is really good at faking it. And, it's just, and so there's been times where, the training really matters. Like the best job I have ever had has been at Chipotle. Like, believe it or not, the burrito place. And it's because they spent a lot of time training everyone. And I know that's not the case for like their managers necessarily, but for like the line cooks and stuff, they made sure everyone knew how to do everything the way they wanted. And so it was very easy for me to understand what needs to be done. But when you say, okay, well, go write a report on this. Okay, how many pages do you want it to be? I can make it 4 pages, or I can make it 2. Which one do you want? And I can't, we can't predict what other people want like that. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely understand. For me, cook is not a good idea because I'm going to be too stressed out. I have anxiety. So for me, seeing the line of people is just stressing me out because I want everybody to be happy, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to be fast enough to make them happy. So that's just putting me so much stress that I make mistakes because of my stress. I'm doing a lot of mistakes, and sometimes made me fired, and I've worked in a subway. It was not really a good idea. I think I worked there for a week before the manager screamed at me really, and she said I was not good at nothing and stuff like that in front of all the clients just because I was not fast enough. That was a terrible experience. It was so horrible. I cried my eyes off, and I was like, it's another reason for never working. In my mind, I was like, I don't want to work anymore. I don't want that. It just doesn't work for me, and yeah, it was traumatizing. Oh, my work experience.
Yeah. Well, I can't even. Yeah, that's like. Yeah, it's so frustrating, and I think, from my perspective, a lot of it comes down to like education. I think, like, of others, in terms of, you might be naturally good at something, but just because you're good at it doesn't mean you're good at teaching others how to do it. And if somebody under who is if it's your employee, and your employee isn't doing something right or isn't doing something well, like, I think that's ultimately a reflection of you. Not like 100%, but if all of my students fail a test, then it's I either wrote the test poorly and didn't include the correct information I should have included, or I didn't teach it well enough and set them up so that they can be successful. And I think a lot of people don't want to, because that's a lot of responsibility to know that if somebody else is failing, it's your fault. But I think, like, that's something where if you can accept that we're all in this together, and the more we help each other, the more successful everyone will be. I think that helps a lot, especially people in our position. And, like, I don't know, it just makes me angry how people think they can do everything perfectly all by themselves without help. Like, we all need some help and extra guidance sometimes. I'm not going to be able to, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. Like I don't know, my husband just for whatever reason does not understand directions at all. Like he lives in the same town as he grew up in, and you could put him on one end of the town and he won't be able to find his way home. Um, and he's been here for like 27 years now. And like that's just something that he's not good at. And me, I've got like a pigeon brain. I can know exactly where to go. It's just like something I'm good at. And working together, it works out really well because he'll be able to remind me, oh hey, maybe you should look both ways before you cross the street. Or maybe that car isn't gonna maybe that car's not looking at you, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's the same thing when you go to a new job. They want you to learn everything in one day. For me, it doesn't work. So a lot of jobs here, pre-pandemic, they will fire you like the first week you arrive if you're not good enough for them, And the problem is not because I'm not good, it's only I need more time to process the new environment because I'm overstimulated. And when I'm overstimulated, I'm not learning anything. I wrote a post about that on my blog, and I also put it on my podcast. It's a separate post because this show is also on the podcast, but I'll sometimes add special episode more because I want to say things, and I want to share, and it's my platform to do so. Because sometimes I just don't want to show my face because I don't feel like it, but I still want to share information. My podcast is made for that, and it's just awesome how I can just share my life and share it with somebody else and share other stories as well, like your story. You're successful, but you will be probably more successful if you knew,
Yeah. Well, and I know that like if I get a job where there's not a really strong onboarding process, I am not going to be successful. Like I know it. I've learned from experience. I need a very strong onboarding process. Once I get that, and like once I get the training, I know I can do really well. And like for me, fortunately, I can play to people's biases about like having the doctorate, so they know, they'll easier for them to trust that for some reason I am more capable of doing the job than somebody else, when in reality, a lot of times everybody would be successful if they had those tools. So it's, and it's so frustrating. And it also like makes it difficult, like that's another reason why academia was so good for me, is because everybody over communicates all the time. And so, it's okay to write a 500-word email. Well, I mean, not okay. And so it's like not weird, but then figuring out that like, okay, is this academia that's made me like really, really wordy, or is it ADHD? Where does that, is it both? Yeah, so that's been challenging. And yeah, I just wanted to, it just occurred to me that like, one of the most, I always thought I was like just extra awkward and extra weird. I was always kind of that kid in the corner who didn't really get bullied, but was never cool, just sort of exists. And a lot of that is because I just, I like to talk, and I like to relate to people through like anecdotes and experiences, and knowing that that's like a trait of people with ADHD and on the autism spectrum and everything, that like it's not me making the story about me, it's me being like, oh my gosh, I understand what you're saying so well, and I totally get that, and this is me like showing my interest in what you had to say. That has been one of the cooler things to realize, that that's not like a, it's not, doesn't mean I am necessarily forever bad at socializing. It just means I socialize different than other people.
Yeah, I do socialize differently too, and this is just how it works. I'm doing my best, and if you don't like me, what do you want me to say? You don't need to like me, and
yeah.
it gave me a character, but at the same time, it closed me up a lot about things because I didn't want to get myself hurt, because people did bully me a lot when I was
Mm-hmm.
a child. Somebody just cut my hair once and stuff like that, so it was quite bad.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to, again, I'm invisible. I just sort of coast by for whatever reason.
I wish I was invisible, but I was not, unfortunately. But and this is affecting adult life. What happened to you when you were a child? Psychopath does not come psychopath for
Yeah,
no reason. Normally, I'm not psychopath, but you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah. I like, no, that's exactly it. It's like there's a really cool, of course I can't remember the name or the author of this book. Uh Actually, I just did. It's called Hidden Valley Road, and it's about like a whole family where the kids, 12 kids, like half of them ended up having schizophrenia, and it turns out like the majority of the kids had the gene for it, but
Mhm.
with the kids who like experienced a lot of stress or bullying or like things like that, it like turned the gene on, they think.
Switch on, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, well, you got to expect people are going to respond to stuff like, why how else would you expect people to respond in that situation? Or like, and also just kids really suck. They have no, I mean, well, their brains aren't developed, but like, yeah, it's so annoying.
True, it is
Yeah.
very.
Oh my gosh, that's why I'm really glad that, again, that I got the diagnosis, because it
Mhm.
just made me realize that I'm not alone in these struggles, and being in spaces where everyone has made it as far as they have because of, their intelligence and work ethic, but also because of all the privileges that come with um, having parents who went to college, or being white and middle class, things like that. And they don't think a ton about like mental health or, learning disabilities, because so you say in college, like if you have a learning, people just assume that you
You're
can't.
dumb.
Yeah, you're dumb, and it's not intelligence isn't like this
Linear.
speed. Yeah, it's not. Everybody has their own like skills, and I don't know.
It's true. It's true.
I
It's
like
true.
I love and hate school at the same time. I love it because it was something I was good at, and I hate it because I've seen so many, like I've had so many just absolutely brilliant students who struggled for whatever reason, like they're depressed or they had something happen in their life or they have a learning disability, and the school just like spits them up and chews them up and spits them out.
True.
And without regard to who they are or like their individual needs.
Yeah, it's true.
So frustrating.
So, what would you wish happened to you when you what do you would you wish your parent did for you when you were a child?
Oh my gosh, talk about difficult English construction. The like, I don't know what type of. I just know in like German and French, so like plusquamperfect is just. I think that's what it is. Anyway, so what would I wish my parents would have done? It's a lot of words. I I know that I was pulled into like the principal's office a couple times for behavior issues, and nobody. I wish they would have like actually taken that seriously, because then I might have gotten the support I needed. But again, it's the 90s. There's not a lot of support to be had.
Mhm.
You know, it probably would have meant that I didn't feel so pressured to like cheat in high school. And I would have known like, okay, I'm going to have a hard time remembering this formula, like you said, or I'm going to have a hard time remembering this date, and that's okay because I still understand the information. Just because I'm off by 2 or 3 years doesn't mean you have to yell at me for 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It happened. So yeah, it would have probably saved me a lot of pain. But I don't know. It's nice to wish that things would have been different, but for me, it's like it's not going to really change anything now. I mean, I can learn from it, and I know how to support students and kids who have ADHD. And it made me like, I also wish my parent, like when I told my parents I had the diagnosis, they didn't believe me. My mom's like, oh no, everybody's like that. I'm like, because you probably are like this too. Yeah, it would have been nice to be believed like at first. It's, yeah.
I feel you. So what do you do to help your student with ADHD? What do you do better?
Oh gosh, I love, I'm a huge fan of like very clear processes, like saying step one, you have to do this. This looks like a given example. And I rewrite it a couple times. I share it in like PowerPoints and I put it in the syllabus and, deliver it a couple of different ways. I also like check in with all of my students when I have the capacity to see how their projects are going throughout the semester, not just at the end, because I once wrote a paper in a German class, and the assignment was write on a controversial topic. So I wrote on a controversial topic, and it turns out that the professor, like, I missed something, and we were all supposed to write on like the death penalty or something. And just wrote wrong topic on a sticky note and just put it on my paper and gave me a 0 and handed it back.
Oh
so
no.
Like, yeah, and it was like a longer paper, and had somebody like checked in with me, that would have been helpful. And like, it's a pain in the butt for them, I'm sure, to submit multiple drafts of things, but I really, if I can catch something before they put too much effort into it or struggled too much to like my thing is I make problems more complex than they need to be a lot of times. So if I can help a student catch that, A, it helps me learn, but B, I think it obviously will help the student be more successful. So I'm all about like open communication, frequent communication. Same thing with anybody I work with. I do not leave a meeting without having a next steps outline, because if you don't tell me what's coming next, you're not getting it.
It's true. And sometimes we have difficulty to understand sarcasm, and things like that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my husband's so sarcastic, and I'm just like, half the time I'm like, okay, do I believe you? I'm not gonna believe you. And then it ends up being something true, or like I'll have a friend say something that seems really just out there and random, and then it turns out they were trying to confide in me, and I was like, oh, I assumed they were being sarcastic, but it turns out they were just being genuine, and they actually have this very random problem in their lives, and they wanted me to help. And I'm like, okay, I definitely did not believe you because you've been sarcastic in the past. Sorry. Talk about trust issues.
It's true. Sometimes it's a struggle to be us,
Yeah, or like, Zoom was being on camera all the time was a huge struggle too, because all of a sudden I'm like looking at my face and what my face is doing, and I've got like a video of a presentation I had to give for some academic thing, and I'm like moving my eyebrows like this because I'm like, what does a face do? Like, what am I supposed to like? Yeah, so I feel bad for my viewers.
I understand. It's it's hard sometimes being us, like I said. It's not easy.
No.
But But what will you want to change in your past if you have one thing?
One thing, I wish I would have known that like I'm going to have trouble remembering things. Instead of like expecting myself to remember things like everyone else does. Just like knowing that that's not going to happen and trying to make it happen is just going to make me miserable.
True.
Like I used to study for exams by writing dates over and over and over in my notebook like 100 times, or I would come up with like really long mnemonic devices, which are like, so I say like, fat cats eat chowder, and it would be like FCEC, the first letter of each one, and then it'd be like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a composer with an F name, like, or whatever, like Fibonacci called every, I don't know, calculation or something like that. And that would be how I remember things, is like silly stories. And I always felt really weird for that. And like I wasn't actually learning that way. But it turns out I was. And I was beating myself up over something I have no control over, and beating myself up for like finding ways to make things work that work for me, and then being disappointed when it doesn't look like everybody else's. So I wish I would have like, yeah, I wish I would have known that like it's gonna be different for me, and that's okay.
Yeah. So it's mostly it for today. I was wondering if you had something else that you want to share before we leave.
I would share, actually, you talking about college and like us talking about school and stuff so much. There's a lot of universities now are starting to have like disabled student unions, like places for students with disabilities to go. And I think that having that support network is so important. And it really helps you, like, I can ask somebody, or I could ask somebody else, like, hey, how'd you figure out this problem? Or like, what accommodations did you ask for? And just knowing also that like during the accommodations process for like disability in universities, that there's a lot you can ask for beyond like double time, like twice as much time. You can ask for tutors, you can ask for scribes, like people to write stuff down. There's just so much that doesn't go said. And also, if you're struggling, there's a strong chance, especially if it's like with depression, like everybody in higher education is super depressed. So like if you're struggling because of like depression or anxiety, there's a good chance that as long as your professor isn't like a white dude over 45, that the person will probably understand and be willing to work with you. And that's something like I didn't know that I needed these additional helps or these additional things, so I didn't know to ask for them. But I really wish that somebody would have told me that everybody's going to need help at some point, and that it's okay to ask for help.
Thank you so much for being here today. So thank you again, everybody that watched it in live or is going to watch it in the future. Thank you so much. The ADHD Melody Show is really my little baby. I taking care of it so much, and I really want to see it grow. So if you want to put a thumbs up on YouTube, if you want to follow my YouTube channel, you just search for the ADHD Melody Show. It really is going to help me a lot. Again, thanks 0DB for sending me awesome product. I'm going to have the new collection very soon. I cannot wait to show it to you because it's really helpful to calm the mind. And please go check them out as well. You can check down below if you are on YouTube, obviously. All the links to see all the equipment that I use, all my sponsors and partnerships. And yeah, thanks so much again. And if you want to donate to the college fund, I'm going to also put the link down below. So go down below or on the top if you're on LinkedIn. Thanks again, and have an amazing day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.